It's 2:38. The sky over Mumbai is milky white. Not smog. Meteorologists know what smog looks like. Porosity rate. Slow. Scattered light from 40,000 feet up. Porosity. The quantum leap. Today we trace who decided to hack your sky. The quantum leap. Science fiction that isn't fiction yet. Here's the flash forward. Someone pulls the trigger first. In 2022, two men started doing exactly that. Luke Eisman and Andrew Song. Make sunsets. No regulatory approval, no international oversight, nothing. Their business model, the world eventually pays them to continue. That experiment is still running, nobody stopped them. This is the governance vacuum we all now live inside. But the physics behind it, that's the unsettling part. June 15, 1991. Mount Pinatubo erupts in the Philippines. 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. For 15 months, global temperatures dropped half a degree. A volcanic disaster, but for some a blueprint. Paul Crutzen noticed this. He had a Nobel Prize. In 2006, his paper broke a scientific taboo. He argued SAI research was a legitimate scientific option. Suddenly the forbidden field was speaking out loud. SAI, Stratospheric Aerosol Injection. The mechanism is elegant. Spray fine reflective particles high enough they scatter sunlight. Least solar energy reaches Earth. Planet cools. Simple physics. Mount Pinatubo proved it. The physics is not in question. What's in question? The second-order consequences. All of them. David Keith at Chicago built a program for answers. The CSE launched in 2024 with 100 million. Now, let's look at what the science actually shows. The data is more consequential than the headlines suggest. The proposed deployment scale is staggering: 270 aircraft, 1 million metric tons per year, dispersed globally. Wake Smith at Harvard calculated the cost, $35 billion, for initial polar deployment by 2040. That's the trajectory. The model starts polar because tropics face the highest risk. Here's the equity paradox that should trouble everyone. Polar deployment cools rich, high-latitude nations most, not the equator. The most vulnerable nations are also the least protected. Ashutosh et al. Published this in NPJ Climate in 2025. SAI could disrupt monsoons across Asia. 2 billion people. This is a peer-reviewed finding, not a model projection. Peer-reviewed. What strikes us, the monsoon disruption, is the mechanism. It is the mechanism. You cannot separate them. Funding tripled in 2025, money outpacing governance again. UK's ARIA committed £57 million. Largest government stake yet. Israeli-US startup Stardust Solutions raised $60 million. Private sector enters. A second unnamed company received $75 million that same year. When we read this data, we sourced it twice. The US GAO published its 2026 assessment. Not fringe. Who should control the planetary thermostat? Drop your answer. 3 threads now need to converge. Follow carefully. Thread 1, the termination problem. Nobody talks about this enough. Once SAI begins, stopping becomes its own catastrophe. Termination shock. Decades of suppressed warming returns in a single decade. Here is the micro-revelation almost nobody has processed yet. In 2020, shipping fuel regulations inadvertently triggered a real termination shock. Sulfur dioxide from ships fell 80%, almost overnight. A measurable warming spike followed. Published in NCBI 2024, the largest inadvertent geoengineering event ever. And it warmed. That's not a model. That happened. That is the data. The governance vacuum, no one is in charge. literally. The National Intelligence Council documented the threat explicitly. State or non-state actors may develop this independently, possibly covertly. Harvard's SCPX experiment was cancelled in 2024. Public opposition, a legitimate academic experiment, cancelled, but Make Sunsets keeps going. Thread 3, the scenario fork, 2 possible futures, 1 decision. In 2040, internationally governed SAI with transparent monitoring. In the other, a wealthy nation deploys. No one stops. The difference between those worlds? A regulatory vote, happening now. These look like parallel problems. They are not converging. June 21, 2026. 4 senior climate scientists warned us. Raymond Pierre-Humer, Julius Lingo, Michael Mann, Masson Delmotte. Not fringe voices. Oxford Penn, the UK Met Office, France. Their message: deployment cannot stop once started, a century minimum. What we're watching, science's self-correction mechanism activating in real time. The termination shock mechanism is now fully documented. Here, think dialysis. The patient cannot survive without the machine. The therapy can't stop without the patient dying. Termination shock. 10 years of SAI, 1 to 3 degree swing, rapid. Stevenson saw this coming. His 2021 novel predicted it. A private actor deploys SAI. Geopolitical chaos follows. Already, the scenario for resolves. It is grimmer than either path. No option to not start. Research is operational, clock running. Keith is simultaneously SAI's most credible advocate and critic. He published the case for and the case against. Chicago is doing what Harvard could not. Field experiments. Frank is designing the aircraft. Langford is building them. Electra Aero and Iris Aero. Purpose-built for stratospheric aerosol delivery. The infrastructure for planetary intervention is being quietly assembled. Ming-Yi Wang at Chicago. Stratospheric aerosol formation is complex. Particle size, distribution, altitude all determine the effect. Enormously variable. Models show 1 to 3 degrees variance. That gap, civilizational. This study used model projections. Scale is still untested. No one demonstrated this at grid scale. The physics holds. Whether it works at civilization scale is a different question. Jenny Stevens at Maynooth calls this the moral hazard. If SAI works, why cut emissions at all? That's the moral hazard argument. Critics have documented it as extensively. The Nick, a nation could start for under 1 billion. Please Stella. Please call Stella. The ecologist documented the weaponization scenario in February 2025. Stop SAI over an adversary, cause a drought in their breadbasket. Weather as geopolitical weapon. Not fiction, the ecologist documented it. Monitoring satellites go offline in coming years. The gap widens. Monitoring systems aging out exactly when intervention scales up. This is not fringe theory. This is documented institutional record. The convergence technology accelerating faster than governance. Always. Not unique to geoengineering. It is the pattern we repeat. What does all of this mean for 50 years? The quantum leaps framework for understanding this decision moment. Here's what the trajectory actually looks like from 2026. A moderate 2035 deployment scenario, polar start, 0 degrees initially, scaling to half a degree over a decade, deceptively dangerous. Mumbai's sky stays milky white in 2038, permanently, by design. 1 billion people discover someone else is programming their weather. The monsoon arrives late, then later, then barely. NPJ 2025. They did not vote. They do not benefit. They pay. The civilizational question. Who votes when stakes are global? The deeper engagement here is the decision tree that matters. Question 1. Who has deployment authority? Currently, anyone with capital. Question 2. What triggers termination? Currently, nothing legally binding. Question 3. Who pays compensation when monsoons fail? Nobody knows. No legally binding answers to those 3 questions, anywhere. ESD and Copernicus published one genuinely hopeful finding in 2026. AI could increase land carbon storage. Diffused light helps trees. That's a preprint. Promising. Awaiting replication. We know the distinction. Salata Institute at Harvard published new research directions in 2025. New directions, not just deployment science but governance frameworks. The scientists who watched Contact in 1997 now build telescopes. They are now asking whether we should actually deploy. MIT Technology Review 2026. Geoengineering gets a reality check. The headline says geoengineering. The data says decision underway. That gap is where science lives. Policy must arrive there. 2 civilizational timelines diverge based on one real decision. In one 2040 international treaty, shared monitoring, consent mechanism. In the other, unilateral deployment, geopolitical confrontation, monsoon disruption. Crutzen published at 73. He had already won the Nobel. He died in 2021. He did not see what followed. One paper, Planetary Consequences. That is scientific publications' weight. The last generation to see natural sky is already born. They do not know it. Neither do the aircraft engineers. 4 convergence analysis and source papers are in the video. The framework to track what you establish is liability first. The first governance framework is the inflection point. Watch it. In 5 years, does anyone have authority to stop this? 2 labs, no framework, 1 sky. A convergence nobody predicted. Not a coincidence. It is how the future always arrives. Your prediction in the comments, governed or unilateral by 2035. Next, we trace what happens when AI meets climate models. Subscribe. The convergence timeline just accelerated.